For centuries, the Russian army could rely on an invisible ally, a natural force, unpredictable, relentlessly effective, an element that broke some of the greatest armies in history. Today, that ally no longer protects Russia. It is turning against it. Because this time, Moscow is not defending, it is attacking. And on Ukrainian ground, winter is no longer slowing the enemy. It is paralyzing the force that is advancing. According to multiple corroborating sources, current weather conditions on eastern Ukraine's front are doing more than complicating Russian operations. They are exposing deep cracks in logistics, organization, and troop management. And what the latest information reveals is deeply concerning. In this video, we will examine how the cold, combined with contested operational choices, has become a major factor of attrition for Russian forces around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, positions Moscow claims to control, but which tell a very different story on the ground. To understand what is really happening in this strategic area, we first need to look at the most recent data, and more importantly, who is sharing it. On January 23rd, United 24 Media reported that Ukrainian forces from the 7th Army Corps continue to hold their positions in the Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad sectors. Despite earlier Russian statements claiming full control of these areas, observed facts on the ground suggest otherwise. The northern sectors of both cities remain under Ukrainian control. The lines are holding, and most importantly, they are not moving. This information was confirmed by Volodymyr Polevy, head of strategic communications for Ukraine's 7th Army Corps. In a public statement, he explained that positions are being maintained despite constant pressure, but that the Russian offensive is showing clear signs of exhaustion. According to him, this slowdown is not solely the result of Ukrainian defensive action. It is also directly linked to environmental conditions. And this is where the situation becomes particularly revealing, because it is not just combat that is causing problems. According to Polevy, operational data and intelligence reports show a gradual degradation of Russian offensive capabilities. The main reasons are clear: harsh weather conditions combined with insufficient attention to troop welfare. In other words, the problem is not just the cold, it is how that cold is being managed. Temperatures in the Donetsk region have dropped well below freezing. According to the BDC, some areas reached around -14 degrees Celsius at night in late January. And this level of cold is not unusual for the region at this time of year. What is different this time is preparation, because while winter affects everyone, it does not affect everyone equally. On the Ukrainian side, units deployed in these sectors benefit from established fortifications, proper shelters, logistical reserves, and crucially, heating. These elements may seem secondary from a distance. In reality, they are decisive. They allow soldiers to recover, to maintain mobility, and to limit cold-related losses. Supply lines remain active, unit rotations are possible, and this helps preserve defensive stability. On the Russian side, the situation is very different. For units engaged in offensive operations, every degree below zero becomes an additional obstacle, and sometimes an insurmountable one. According to Polevy, Russian assault troops carry only what they can transport themselves. This typically includes a ground mat, a sleeping bag, a blanket, and sometimes a small portable stove. But on an exposed front line, this is nowhere near sufficient, especially since any attempt to generate heat, particularly at night, dramatically increases the risk of detection. In an environment under constant surveillance by modern reconnaissance assets, any heat source becomes visible. The result, soldiers are forced to remain immobile in extreme conditions. They cannot always dig into frozen ground. They cannot adequately protect themselves. The consequences are mechanical. And they are not measured only in casualties, they are measured in terrain. Despite continued offensive operations, results remain limited. Recent assessments from the Institute for the Study of War indicate that Russian forces continued operations toward Pokrovsk in late January without confirmed advances. Day after day, the picture is the same. Presence, pressure, engagement, but no meaningful territorial gains. This stalemate is not new, but it is now being amplified by winter conditions. And this is where the strategic irony becomes obvious. Because this climatic factor, long viewed as a historical advantage for Russia, now appears to be playing a very different role. In the next section, we will look at what this so-called winter advantage really represents in military history, and why this time it is no longer working in Russia's favor. For generations, winter has been portrayed as a structural advantage for Russia, an almost automatic factor embedded in military narratives, historical analyses, and strategic culture. But what we are seeing today on the Ukrainian battlefield suggests a very different reality. Because this time, Russia is not waiting for winter, it is advancing into it. In the collective imagination, winter is often described as a force that saved Russia more than once. Sometimes called General Winter, General Frost, or General Mud, the name varies, but the idea is the same. Natural conditions have repeatedly neutralized foreign armies that advanced too far, too fast, and without proper preparation. The historical examples are well known. In the early 19th century, Napoleon's forces, deep inside Russian territory, were devastated by cold, supply shortages, and logistical collapse. In the 20th century, during World War II, German forces faced similar conditions during their advance toward Moscow. In both cases, winter amplified strategic mistakes that already existed. But one crucial element is often overlooked. In all of these historical cases, Russia was on the defensive. Today, that situation is reversed. Russia is not defending its territory from a foreign army. It is conducting offensive operations on ground it does not fully control. And that changes everything. Because winter does not punish the force that holds fortified positions. It punishes the force that advances. Moving units are more exposed, their supply lines are longer, their dependence on logistics is greater. In this context, cold is no longer an automatic ally, it becomes a multiplier of difficulty. And that is exactly what Ukrainian military officials are describing on the ground. According to assessments shared by Ukraine's 7th Army Corps, the cold impacts several critical dimensions of the Russian offensive. First, the soldiers themselves. Prolonged sub-zero temperatures reduce mobility, reaction speed, and alertness. Even minor injuries become harder to treat. Physical recovery slows dramatically. Second, equipment. Vehicles, mechanical systems, and transport assets are more prone to failure. Batteries drain faster. Moving parts operate less efficiently. Third, logistics. Delivering supplies, food, and equipment in winter conditions requires rigorous organization and adapted resources. Without that, frontline units quickly become isolated. And it is precisely here that the contrast between the two sides becomes clear. On the Ukrainian side, defending forces benefit from relatively short, consolidated supply lines in these sectors. This allows continuity of resupply even in harsh conditions. It also enables troop rotations, limits exhaustion, and maintains operational stability. On the Russian side, many assault units advance with limited logistical support. According to multiple accounts reported by specialized media, some units operate without constant vehicular support. That means each soldier depends almost entirely on what they can carry. In a winter environment, that constraint becomes critical. But the consequences do not stop at logistics or equipment. They also affect morale and the variability to sustain pressure on the front. Data collected by multiple analytical institutes show a gradual decrease in the intensity of engagements in certain areas. This does not mean inactivity, but it does indicate a reduction in tempo, coordination, and operational depth. Assaults become smaller, less supported, and often less effective. This trend is particularly visible around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, where Ukrainian positions remain broadly stable despite sustained pressure. At this point, one question becomes unavoidable. If winter conditions complicate offensive operations this severely, what are the concrete consequences for the soldiers on the ground? In the next section, we will examine the living and deployment conditions of Russian frontline troops during the winter and what recent testimonies reveal. When people talk about winter warfare, they often think in terms of maps, arrows, and troop movements. But on the ground, reality is far more physical. It is measured in hours spent motionless, in kilometers walked on foot, and in decisions made under constant constraint. In this context, the deployment conditions of Russian soldiers around Pokrovsk become decisive. According to multiple Ukrainian military sources, Russian units in this area often advance without continuous logistical support. This means soldiers rely solely on the equipment they can carry. In winter conditions, that burden becomes overwhelming. A soldier must choose between cold protection, food, ammunition, and essential gear. Every choice involves a trade-off, and in extreme cold, those trade-offs quickly turn into liabilities. Because cold does not just slow you down, it wears you out. Sustained sub-zero temperatures directly impact physical performance.
Dexterity declines. Movements become slower. Fatigue sets in faster. Even simple tasks take more time and energy. Add to that forced immobility. In exposed environments, soldiers cannot always move freely or build effective shelters, especially when the ground is frozen. As a result, long waiting periods become physically and mentally exhausting. But the impact of cold does not stop at individuals. It also degrades unit-level effectiveness. Extreme cold complicates communication. Electronic equipment becomes more vulnerable. Batteries drain rapidly. Transmissions become less reliable. In this environment, maintaining coordination becomes harder. Units fall out of sync. Support arrives late. Decisions are made with incomplete information. For an attacking force, these factors significantly reduce overall effectiveness. And when these difficulties accumulate, they eventually translate on the battlefield. Observation reports indicate that some offensive actions in the region are increasingly fragmented. Rather than coordinated large-scale operations, engagements are often carried out by small groups. This approach can maintain constant pressure, but without sufficient support, it also exposes those units. In harsh winter conditions, such groups can quickly become isolated. And when isolation sets in, risk escalates. Another critical issue is casualty management. In severe weather, evacuation becomes more complex. Movement slows. Routes become less passable. Delays increase. Even injuries that would normally be manageable become dangerous. This adds further strain to frontline units, which must continue operations while dealing with mounting human costs. At this stage, a clear pattern emerges. Winter conditions are not a backdrop. They fundamentally reshape operational dynamics. And as winter deepens, another reality becomes visible: moral erosion. In the next section, we will analyze the impact of these conditions on troop morale, unit composition, and what the profiles of captured or observed soldiers reveal. When an offensive slows, the reasons are not always visible on a map. They are often found in the mindset of those tasked with carrying it out. And in the current winter conditions, the human factor is central.
Harsh living conditions, combined with the absence of visible progress, weigh heavily on morale. Constant cold, uncertainty, prolonged frontline deployments without clear rotation. All of this contributes to cumulative psychological fatigue. In this type of environment, motivation does not collapse overnight. It erodes gradually. And this erosion becomes particularly visible when examining the profiles of the soldiers involved. According to multiple analyses cited by independent media, the composition of units on certain axes has shifted over time. Experienced personnel appear increasingly scarce on the front lines. In their place, there is a growing presence of older soldiers or troops less trained for extreme conditions. This assessment is based on public data, testimonies, and field observations. In a demanding winter environment, this shift is significant because experience and preparation make all the difference when conditions deteriorate. Winter warfare cannot be improvised. It requires specialized training, an understanding of physical limits, and the ability to anticipate cold-related risks. Without that, even motivated soldiers can quickly find themselves overwhelmed. Negative temperatures amplify every mistake, every delay, every failure.
And these individual difficulties eventually produce collective effects. Observers report growing signs of organizational fatigue. As pressure increases, certain choices become unavoidable. Less frequent rotations, more conservative decision-making, and a decline in tactical initiative. In some areas, actions appear designed more to maintain presence than to achieve meaningful gains. A classic indicator of a force trying to preserve capacity rather than fully commit it. Reports from specialized media suggest that some Russian officers have requested redeployment to less exposed sectors. When such requests appear, they are telling. They reflect a clear perception of terrain and climate severity. They also suggest that the level of strain sometimes exceeds what is considered sustainable. Even when these requests are denied, their existence alone is a signal. At this point, a broader question emerges. If winter conditions are impacting morale, unit composition, and organization this deeply, what are the medium-term strategic consequences? In the next section, we widen the lens. Effects across the front, pressure sustainability, and implications for the months ahead. When local difficulties persist, they rarely remain local. Across an extended front, every sector is connected, and what is happening around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad goes far beyond 2 points on a map. Assessments published by multiple analytical institutes suggest that difficulties in sustaining offensive pressure are not confined to a single area. Across several axes, operational tempo appears lower than in previous periods. This does not mean inactivity, but it does indicate constrained adaptation driven by weather, losses, and accumulated fatigue. In this environment, every attempt at progress becomes more costly, and as costs rise, trade-offs become visible. Faced with winter constraints, headquarters must make choices. Concentrate resources on select sectors, reduce intensity elsewhere, or adopt a more cautious posture while waiting for better conditions. These decisions have direct battlefield effects. Frontline units may receive less support, planned offensives may be delayed or altered, and strategic initiative can gradually erode. But while some are forced to adjust, others consolidate. On the Ukrainian side, the ability to maintain stable positions through winter is a major advantage.
It allows forces to reinforce fortifications, improve logistics, and preserve manpower. This stability contrasts sharply with the difficulties faced by attacking forces. Over time, that gap can become decisive, because in a war of attrition, time itself becomes a weapon. Every week without significant progress has consequences. Resources continue to be consumed, fatigue accumulates, and maneuver margins shrink. In this context, winter acts as an accelerator of attrition. It does not decide outcomes on its own, but it amplifies existing trends, and those trends are beginning to form a trajectory. Available information suggests a gradual weakening of offensive capacity on certain axes. This does not signal immediate collapse, but it does indicate that sustaining the same level of intensity is becoming increasingly difficult. As winter drags on, each new attempt requires greater effort for uncertain returns. At this stage, an interim conclusion is unavoidable. Winter is not just scenery, it has become a strategic factor in its own right. In the final section, we bring these elements together to understand what this situation reveals about the broader dynamics of the conflict and what it may foreshadow. If we step back and assemble the elements observed over recent weeks, one reality stands out. What is happening around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad is not just a winter episode, it is a diagnostic. The climate itself is not new. What is new is what it reveals. It exposes the limits of a prolonged offensive conducted without clear logistical superiority. It amplifies organizational weaknesses, and it makes strategic choices harder to conceal. Winter does not create problems, it accelerates them, and in doing so, it acts as a ruthless mirror. Available data show that despite continued operations, territorial gains remain limited. Ukrainian positions around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad are holding. The lines are not collapsing, and every attempt at progress demands disproportionate effort. Under these conditions, the question is no longer just advancement, it is sustainability. Because an offensive is not judged by intent alone, but by its ability to be sustained over time. As winter persists, time becomes the central variable. Every day without meaningful progress consumes resources. Every additional week deepens troop fatigue, and every month strengthens the position of those holding ground. In this equation, stability becomes power, and that is precisely what we are seeing on the Ukrainian side. The ability to hold positions, preserve forces, and manage rotations creates a clear contrast. It allows not only resistance, but preparation, analysis, adjustment. In a long war, that approach can be decisive. By contrast, the difficulties facing attacking forces leave little margin. The observed signals, slower tempo, human attrition, constrained adaptation are not anecdotal. They indicate a phase where choices grow more expensive, where each decision commits more resources for uncertain results. These signals do not predict the future, but they explain the present, and that is the purpose of analysis. Winter, long portrayed as an automatic advantage for Russia, is now playing a very different role. It does not decide outcomes by itself, but it weighs on every choice, every movement, and every attempt to advance. Around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, it acts as a silent force of attrition, one that slows, weakens, and exposes. What comes next will depend on adaptability, available resources, and time. If you want to continue understanding the real dynamics behind the maps and press releases, subscribe to the channel. More analysis is coming very soon.